All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mark Twain House's Trouble Begins with Paul Schiller for his lecture on all things Gillette Castle. I'm Mallory Howard, the assistant curator here at the Mark Twain House Museum. We are so excited to host you this evening for this hybrid event. So thank you for joining us both today here in person as well as virtually from your own homes. As a reminder, a replay of the event will be made available on the Trouble Begins playlist of our own YouTube channel, accessible through our website. And at the end of the program, we will take a few minutes to answer some questions from the audience, both in person and for those of you watching virtually. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the 2024 Trouble Begins season, Kathleen and David Jimenez, and I'd like to thank our pasta reception sponsor, Salute. So round of applause for them. So now let me introduce our guest. Paul Schiller spent almost a decade working at Gillette Castle State Park. Aside from providing engaging and informative tours to castle visitors, he served as an archivist, researcher, and educator for the park. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Paul created a series of video tours of the castle available on the Friends of Gillette Castle State Park YouTube channel. Paul has spoken about the castle on local radio stations such as ICRV in Ivoryton, WPKN Bridgeport, WGCH Greenwich, WTIC AM, and WRCH and WSHU. I did not mess up any of those letters, which is good. So with that, thank you. With that, let's get started. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you to Jody. Thank you to Rebecca and Alana and everybody else from the Mark Twain House and Museum for setting this up. Thank you all for being here, either live and in person or through the magic of the internet. And of course, thank you to our wonderful sponsors, Kathleen and David Jimenez, and Salute for sponsoring this program and providing that awesome garlic bread. Be glad that you're far away from me right now. Okay, so now to get on with the official show. So good evening. If you're in the audience or watching online, you're here for a Gillette lecture, or as I refer to it, Gillexpert. See, I'm clever. As we are in a place of great cultural significance with a rich history of intellectualism, it only seems appropriate to start this program with a deep philosophical quote. Okay, so this probably requires some explanation. I did a lecture about a year and a half ago, and I actually had this quote on a water bottle. I'm like, I should bring this up. So I actually did, and I figured, Okay, so first, let me start off with a proper introduction. So my name is Paul Schiller, I think. I spent almost a decade working at Gillette Castle State Park. I got to show people around what I lovingly referred to as my castle, talking about its history, pointing out all of its quirks and eccentricities, and telling stories about William Gillette, some of which could possibly be true. I also managed the castle archives, did historical investigations, and worked on educational programming at the park. So today I'll share some information with you folks. Some of it may be verified by historical records, some of it may be completely made up, but don't worry, you won't know the difference. I clocked this script at about 47 minutes, but I'm known to go off script, so don't worry, it won't be like 3 hours, but I hope you don't have a hard stop at 8. As my wife says, I make a short story long. So quick disclaimer, as I alluded to, I no longer work at Gillette Castle and currently hold a completely different position with another state agency. That said, I'm here as a private citizen and a subject matter expert. Any thoughts and opinions are my own. I'm not here speaking for anybody else. I'm not here speaking for state parks, for DEEP, state of Connecticut. I'm literally here just for the fun of it, because, I mean, what else am I going to do on a Tuesday night? Also, just out of force of habit, I commonly refer to as we during the Gillexpert, and it's just like referring to like the state or the park staff, but like I said, it's force of habit. So that brings me back to the great philosophical conundrum before us. So the quote, for any of you who are fans of The Office, Actually, I believe this was from the first episode, where Jim says, if I left, what would I do with all this useless information in my head? Well, I left, and, well, we're about to find out how much useless information I actually have in my head, so buckle up. Okay, so let's get started. So who was William Gillette? I assume you've all heard of the Gillette Company. They do the razor blade, shaving cream, all that fun stuff. Yeah, he has nothing to do with that. Yeah, I always have to put that one out there. So the Gillette Company was actually founded by this guy. His name is King Gillette. First of all, I find that to be hilarious because Will's the one that had the castle, but King was the razor's King Castle. Got it? Now, as far as I know, they had no direct contact. The only documented remarks Will ever made about King Gillette was in regards to spelling or misspelling of their last name. There were very many iterations of Gillette, depending on who you were, as far as how it was spelled. And Will once wrote to a friend, what you want to do, if you don't mind a little advice, is to get some damned inventor to associate your name with a razor. I had a lot of trouble with the final E until Gillette came along with his face lacerator, after which all is well. So, yeah, it helps if you have a commonly misspelled name. Okay, that brings us to our guy right here. That's him. That handsome rascal is the reason I'm standing here, that and the garlic bread. William Gillette, who was he? Well, he was an actor, director, playwright. He basically did everything in the theater, and he was really, really good at it. Think of him sort of like the George Clooney of the late 1800s. If you were a living, breathing person anywhere in the Western world at the turn of the century, then you know who Gillette was. Now, we're going to start off this story at the very beginning. So William Gillette was born in Hartford, July 24th, 1853. Now, his father, Francis, that gentleman on the top left with that admirable beard, Francis was a Yale-educated lawyer, a farmer, a businessman. He had several positions in state government, actually almost became governor of Connecticut, and shortly after Will's birth, he was appointed to serve a 2-year fill-in term in the U.S. Senate. Yeah, he did a lot. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So his father was a senator, and his mother was a hooker. Yeah, her name was Elizabeth Daggett Hooker. She was a direct descendant of the Reverend Thomas Hooker, who founded the settlement of Hartford in the 1630s and is often considered to be the father of Connecticut. What'd you think I meant something different? Get your minds out of the gutter, folks. Yeah, I always have to gauge the audience with that joke. I always have to be careful, but it only seems fitting to bring it out of retirement for an event at the House of America's Humorist. I think Mark Twain would approve, and I mean, for all I know, he made the same comments himself at one point. So, you know. So Will was the youngest of 6 children, but essentially grew up as an only child. His sister Mary died as a toddler, as was all too common back then. His brother Frank went out west during the gold rush. He contracted TB. He died out there in his early 20s. Another brother, Rob, served for the Union during the Civil War. So you could probably guess which picture is him. He was in the Army, fought at Antietam. Then he got sick, resigned his commission, went home, recovered. Then he joined the Navy. He was the assistant paymaster on the USS Gettysburg. After the Union won the Battle of Fort Fisher in 1865, he went ashore to survey the fort with the rest of his crew. A drunk sailor decided it would be a good idea to walk through the powder magazine with a lit torch. So the explosion killed at least 130, if not more people, including Robert Gillette. So that leaves 2 siblings. The guy in the pixelated photo on the left, that's Edward. He was okay. He went out west to Iowa. He became, he ran a local newspaper for a little while, and he also served in the U.S. Congress. And then the other sibling was Lily, who's in the bottom right corner there, although also known as Elizabeth. She actually stayed up in this area. She married a neighbor, George Warner, brother of famed novelist Charles Dudley Warner, and she became a successful illustrator and poet in her own right. I'm going to give a shout out. Harriet Beecher Stowe Center has an awesome collection of Gillette artifacts, and they've been awesome and allowed me to do a lot of research there. So shout out to Beth Burgess, who's a collections manager over there. She actually did a presentation here. No, I don't know, maybe about 5 years back on the Lady Gillettes. So shout out and thanks for letting me look at all the cool stuff. So originally, the Gillette family lived in Bloomfield. Although at the time it wasn't called that. It was called Wintonbury. It was a combination of Windsor, Farmington, and Simsbury. Now, the old story is that one spring day, Francis Gillette looked out the window and saw the beauty of the fields in bloom and decided to lobby for the name change when the town was incorporated in 1835. It could be a true story. I don't know. Sounds nice. Now, this house actually still stands. Although, to be fair, it was moved down the road a little bit because Cigna had to make way for their campus. But it is standing on Bloomfield Ave. It's on the National Historic Registry. Aside from the historical significance of the Gillette family, there's documentation to suggest that house was used as a stop on the Underground Railroad. Now, 1853, Francis Gillette and his brother-in-law, John Hooker, bought 140 acres of land in the Asylum Hill area of Hartford, selling to all their friends who wanted to build big houses there. It became known as the Nook Farm neighborhood. Have you heard of it? It was the intellectual powerhouse of the city, or of the country. Yeah, it's a pretty cool place to grow up. Now, ever since he was a child, Will knew that he wanted to be an actor. He actually built a puppet stage in his parents' carriage house and would put on shows at the age of 13. And while acting was not a dignified profession at that time, he had the support from his parents. I mean, they weren't thrilled about it, but, you know, they learned a deal. And the story is that when Will left to start his career in the theater, his dad brought him to the train station and said something along the lines of, "I brought two sons to this train station only for them to never return. I trust that you'll be the exception." And he was, so good job. He did apprenticeships in the theater, making literally no money as a stock actor. He was living off an allowance from his father. He traveled across the Northeast, Midwest, and Gulf Coast. His first major success in the theater came with a play called The Professor, which he wrote and starred in, and it was followed later by a play called Esmeralda, which is an adapted play that he had did not act in, but he still wrote it, and it was award-winning and pretty successful. His next big hit was in 1884 with A Private Secretary. Over the course of the next 15 years, he wrote and starred in another 11 plays, reaching international success. Now, William Gillette is widely considered to be the dean of the American theater. Part of that goes to his innovation. He did have 5 patents to its name. One was for a method of replicating the sounds of horse hooves galloping. The other 4 were for timestamps. I don't know why. Also, he was pretty innovative in that he's one of the people who popularized the technique of lights fading out and in between scenes, which is something that we basically take for granted because it just always happens. He also moved the theater away from a melodramatic style of acting to a more realistic form, which was very well received. In 1886 and 1895, he came out with his 2 Civil War spy dramas, Held by the Enemy and Secret Service, which received international acclaim. The most endearing quality was that only a few decades after the end of the Civil War, both sides of the North and the South were portrayed in a fair light. So that allowed him to have critical and commercial success all over the country. So, yeah, pretty good. Secret Service actually went on to become Gillette's most popular production by far. He performed that play almost 1,800 times. Now, a little known fact is that it is actually the only play of, well, I'll give that caveat, but one of the only plays of Gillette's where you can actually see it filmed, because in 1977 it was actually a performance of it was filmed for a TV special, and it marked the screen debut for a little-known actress right over there. You may recognize her. Her name's Meryl Streep. And if you don't recognize the guy on the left, that's John Lithgow. Yeah. So Gillette was a popular actor and playwright who excelled in drama and comedy. He was the strong, silent type surrounded by chaos. He'd always be compared to, or he would be compared to, a Clint Eastwood or John Wayne nowadays. And knowing this, he wrote plays with leads that mirrored his strengths. His style was pretty subtle compared to his contemporaries. He was able to capture an audience with a stare or a simple gesture. He was pretty successful financially because he realized that by acting, directing, and writing, all the money came back to him. He was among the highest paid actors in the world. At his peak, Gillette took home $200,000 to $300,000 a year. Over the course of his career, his total earnings were roughly $4 million. So, yeah, he did okay. Now, let's get to talking about the only character that people actually care about, Sherlock Holmes. Yeah. So, of course, it was Arthur Conan Doyle who wrote the Sherlock Holmes novels. Doyle tried to write a play based on his own books. He made a couple of attempts at recruiting some British actors for the lead role. They either refused or wanted to do too much with the stories and character, and he didn't like that. So he ended up reaching out to a producer named Charles Frohman, who was Gillette's manager at the time and worked with him on several occasions. And he's the one that recommended Gillette for the role. Gillette accepted as long as he could have his own autonomy when it came to writing the script. He actually asked whether he could marry Sherlock Holmes off, and Doyle's response was, "You may marry him or murder him or do what you like with him." Doyle had gotten tired of the character, and he didn't care. He wanted people to take his other works more seriously. But he was building a new estate, and he needed money fast. So play was a way to do it. So Gillette took pieces of 4 of the stories, added in his own characters and plot lines. In the spring of 1899, Gillette traveled to England to meet Doyle. The legend is he got off the train in full costume. He walked up to Doyle with his magnifying glass and said something along the lines of, "Unquestionably an author." That sort of broke the glass, got a chuckle, or broke the ice, and secured approval for the play. Now, Gillette debuted as Sherlock Holmes on October 30th, 1899, at the Star Theater in Buffalo. He went on to perform that role over 1,300 times over the course of 33 years. More importantly, he gave us the portrayal of Sherlock Holmes, and he popularized it. So, for example, the deerstalker cap was only hinted at in the novels through the illustrations by Sidney Paget. Originally, Sherlock Holmes' pipe was straight, but it's easier to hold the calabash pipe, the curved pipe, when you're reciting your lines. In the novels, Sherlock Holmes had a pocket lens, which is fine and dandy when you're reading about it, but when you're in the back row of the audience, you need something that you can actually see. So magnifying glass is a little bit bigger and more dramatic, I think. So Elementary, my dear Watson, probably one of the most well-known phrases in our popular culture, not in the books. I mean, different pieces of that phrase were in the books, but never together. But Gillette started using a phrase, "Elementary, my dear fellow," and then that over time evolved. So every actor who, Gillette sort of gave us, I mean, you'd see him there. He gave us the portrayal, the classic portrayal of Sherlock Holmes that everybody knew at that time. And that meant in order to keep this stuff going, everybody after him had to be able to replicate his portrayal, his profile. Orson Welles once said, "It's too little to say that William Gillette resembles Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes looks exactly like William Gillette." I tend to agree. Gillette's career was predominantly on stage. He did one radio play in 1930. The only film he ever did was a silent movie of the Sherlock Holmes play, but I'll get back to that one later. Now let's change gears. I gave you some background on his, looks like I'm missing, actually no, there we go. Oh, hey look, some more Sherlock Holmes stuff. Just soak it in for a second. Okay, I gave you background on his career. Let's talk personal life. During a performance of The Professor, the story is he saw a young actress from Detroit in the audience, Helen Nichols. As they say, it was love at first sight, and they immediately started courting. They were married in the summer of 1882. She was a lesser-known actress, and she gave up her career so that she could travel with Gillette. Fast forward to 1888. She gets a ruptured appendix and dies from complications at the age of 28. Now, the legend is that when Helen was on her deathbed, Will promised her he'd never remarry. Is the story true? Sounds nice. Either way, he outlives his wife by 49 years, single the entire time, never had kids. Now, after Helen's death, he took a 5-year break from his acting career, eventually made his way to Tryon, North Carolina, buying up about 665 acres of land and building a little bungalow, a little 2-room cabin on the top of a mountain there. And that would be a little estate he called Thousand Pines. And that would be his private retreat until he sold it in the mid-20s. Now, there's a story that while he was hiking along in Tryon, he suddenly collapsed. An old mountain woman finds him, nurses him back to health. Now, the woman's name was Mary Polly Carruth, known locally as Aunt Polly. Is the story true? I mean, they were at least friends, whether or not he collapsed and she nursed him. Yeah. Details are a little sketchy. Now, aside from Gillette's family house in Hartford and Thousand Pines, he preferred living in large, slow-moving, and hilarious houseboats. The first one was called the Holy Terror. That one didn't last because the second one was Aunt Polly. I wonder who he named after. It was commissioned in 1898. Built in 1899 and in South Brooklyn by F.W. Offelt & Sons. It was originally 104 feet, made its maiden voyage in 1900 by sailing through the Long Island Sound and Connecticut River, 2 bodies of water become very familiar with over the next couple decades. It was powered by a 3-cylinder triple expansion steam engine, once compared to a sewing machine motor, and reached a top speed of 10 knots, 11.5 miles an hour. Now, by 1902, so 2 years after it first was launched, Gillette decided 104 feet doesn't work for him. So he had it splitting down the middle and had it extended by another 40 feet. So the boat was ended up being 144 feet, and it was his primary summer residence for the first 2 decades of the 20th century, based out of Greenport, Long Island, and may have been what led him to settling down in his future estate. Now, eventually, the Aunt Polly fell into disrepair. By 1922, it had been permanently moored on a cement base on the Connecticut River, just down the hill from the castle. On December 20th, 1932, the Aunt Polly caught fire and burned at its mooring. Now, rumors circulated that Gillette had set fire to it so he could get the insurance money. He addressed those rumors with a letter to the editor saying, "I will take this opportunity to say that the report that I had set fire to the yacht myself in order to get the insurance on her is trifle incorrect, owing to the fact that there was no insurance. I did not think of it at the time." Now, the site was actually surveyed in 2003 and has been designated a state archaeological preserve. Many pieces recovered from the Aunt Polly are actually on display in the castle, and a room that's called the Aunt Polly Room. I mean, I guess it makes sense. And actually, the remnants of the wreckage are still visible. If the tide is low enough, then you can see that picture on the right. That's probably 100+ feet of the keel. You've got some pieces of the mooring. You've got some valves. There's tanks, stuff like that, all visible if the tide is low enough. So I caught those pictures on a really good day. William Gillette had actually planned to build his retirement home on Long Island. He had purchased land in East Marion, New York, and started amassing materials there. Now, the story is that one day in the summer of 1913, Gillette was sailing up the Connecticut River on the Aunt Polly, and he spotted a chain of hills known locally as the Seven Sisters. You can actually see them here. So you can see that's just a row of 7 hills. So where the castle is actually just where it cuts off to the right. So he docked next to the Chester Hadlyme ferry. He hiked up the 200 feet to the top of the mountain, realized, oh, this is great. I'm going to buy land here. He bought 122 acres fairly quickly and decided he was going to build his house, and he did. That's the legend. That one I can debunk, though, because in reality, Gillette was familiar with this area from his days cruising the Connecticut River. His niece actually lived in East Haddam, and there's actually speculation as early as 1907 that he was going to settle either in Haddam or in Deep River, and he started purchasing the land for the castle in 1908, so it's gradual. Now, the castle was meant as Gillette's retirement home. Gillette designed the entire house himself, not that he had a background in that sort of thing, because he didn't. But he was mechanically inclined, and he knew what he wanted for a house. You can see the blueprints here showing the... So left side and top, those are the bedrooms in the second floor, and then that looks over into the balcony over the first floor living room. So he hired his friends at the Portis Walker Company of Hartford. They were the general contractors, and then they started construction in 1914, completed in 1919. He later modified the building. So, like, if you are used to seeing the castle, look at that bottom right photo, and you'll see it looks a lot shorter. That is pre-expansion. So that the expansion was 1923 to 26. He built an apartment suite for his brother-in-law, and he built the tower rooms. So this was pre-1923. And then you can see there's a little tram they used to get up materials up from the river, and you can see sort of what the living room looked like while it was still in the construction phase. So as a finished product, the castle was 14,000 square feet, contained 24 rooms, and came at a cost of $1.1 million, and that was back then. Now, he never actually referred to it as a castle. Officially, it was known as the Seven Sister Estate, named after the hill it was built on. Unofficially, he referred to it as his Hadlyme stone heap, his pile of rocks, or just simply the shack. Yeah. Not bad for a shack. Now, from the outside, obviously, it appears to be a medieval castle in ruin, and that was sort of the idea. But on the inside, it's rustic and cozy, has all the modern comforts and conveniences of home. So from the very beginning, he had all the modern utilities. From the moment Gillette moved in 1919, the castle had electricity, running water, steam heat, satellite TV, Wi-Fi. Okay, I'm lying about those last two, but he did have everything else. So, for example, you take a look over here, we have some light fixtures. Now, most of them are the ones that you see in the top right. That globe was made by the Quazell Company. There's also some Tiffany's in the house, so you can see those. So you take a look over here in the top left corner, we have this beautiful Tiffany light. I'm kidding, it's terrible. That's a Gillette light. Gillette made them himself just by gluing pieces of broken glass together because he wanted to. I mean, some say it was his own little knockoff of Tiffany, but if Louis Tiffany were in preschool or severely intoxicated. But whatever, it's his house, he can do what he wants. Here we have a panel of light switches. They're actually modern brass toggle switches. Gillette put the wood over them. Now, because of his background in the theater, he wanted them to resemble the type of levers you would find backstage. But also, he was a big rail fan because trains are cool, so they're like operating switches for a railroad. Now, over here, we have it's a bathroom. Actually, it was a big deal back then. Complete with sink, toilet, bathtub, hot and cold water. Not that I'm trying to sell the place. And then if you look right behind the sink there, you see that dark blob. That is a cast iron radiator, original. Gillette had steam heat. There's a coal-powered boiler in the ground level. Provided heat for the entire house. Now the state has since converted the system, so it's now runs on oil and it's hot water instead of steam, but the radiators Gillette put in 105 years ago still work. Over here we have a photo that shows a doorway from the entrance hall going in towards the living room, from the living room perspective. In it, you can see some of the varying materials used in the house. So, for example, the stone is local field stone. This is Connecticut, and we don't exactly have a rock shortage around here. Yeah, Gillette just paid farmers from the area to clear it off their land. They brought it up here for him by the ox and cart load. They had to clear the land so they could farm. He had to build a house, so it worked out pretty well for everyone. I'm sure they didn't take it for granted. Get it? Yeah, you're quick. Okay. Now, the mortar in between the stones, I'll take applause for that, I don't mind. The mortar in between the stones is red. Gillette did that by design. If you look in the back in that entrance hall, it's really dark mortar. He wanted it to feel like it was an old medieval castle when you're first walking in. It's just dramatic effect. Cool, but creepy. So he wanted the rest of the house brightened up, so he had the masons dye the mortar red. Now, the wood that you see is southern white oak. It was hand-carved by local carpenters after being brought up here from Tennessee and Virginia, even though white oak is the state tree of Connecticut, but whatever. His choice, his money. Now, looking at this picture, there's actually a really big secret of this house. Gillette was smart. That's not the secret part. He realized it's a really big house, really heavy. He didn't want it to, collapse. So he actually had the entire building framed in steel. So if you take a look, just to the right of the doorway, you see that really tall stone column. That's actually an I-beam that's just covered up by the stone. Yeah, really good idea. We like it. Not too bad. If you look, you could see. This was back when I had my less than satisfactory iPhone. The on the walls right behind where that painting is, you could see that background there. That's grass matting. Sort of weird because as custom as the house is, the matting was extremely generic for the time. He found it in a department store catalog. It's Wanamaker's out in New York and Philly. Supposed to be carpet. It's what normal people use it for, but Gillette thought it looked better on the walls. As far as we know, just like the look, very rustic, fits a natural feel of the house. It's comfortable. I think he probably saw some practical uses, soundproofing, added insulation, absorbing humidity. Although he realized that he has a very large house. It's full of wood and grass. It's pretty flammable. Don't worry, took care of it. He had his own system installed to put out fires. So there are fire hoses on each floor of the house. The last original fire hose, that's that 1.5-inch hose that's right there on the left. That's hanging up on the wall in the butler's pantry. Now, if you take a look, you can see the center photo. That is of a wooden tassel that's hanging from the end of the second floor hallway. In the event of a fire, Gillette would go up to the second floor. He'd pull on that because that is a pull cord. So he'd pull the cord, unless, the cord is on fire. Not great to make it out of wood. Not the brightest idea, but whatever. He didn't ask me. So he pulls the cord, it opens a valve. Water comes out of that cistern that you see there on the right. It's a steel tank that collected rainwater off the roof, stored several thousand gallons. So if he ever had a fire, he just pulled the cord, gravity forces water out of the tank into the hoses. So, it's a pretty good idea. It's a cool system. But, the fire marshal said it's not quite up to code, so the state put in sprinklers because they work better. By the way, don't be impressed by this. It was nothing new back then. They used it in large buildings. Gillette saw it used in the theater. It's where he stole the idea. Although I still give him props for putting it in a house because, it's necessary. Get it? Props, theater. Okay. Now, yeah. It's that kind of a lecture. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the special highlights. These are the types of things in the castle that normally when people come to visit, these are what they remember most, or at least try to, or at least take pictures of. So hopefully they'll remember. First of all, we got a lot of doors, 47 doors in the house, all hand-carved, all with their own unique designs and mechanisms. No two doors are exactly the same, and Gillette designed everything himself. These fancy latches and mechanisms, sort of like a Rube Goldberg kind of thing. This door, even if you've been to the castle, you probably haven't seen it because we didn't really take it out that much. This is one of 3 pocket doors. This is actually, if you saw that photo right here, it's a pocket door that comes out right over there. So we call this the owl door. If you take a look at the top, you can sort of see why. You can see the eyes, you can see the wings. What a hoot. Okay. Other pocket doors, we've got a set over here that has some trains. If you take a look, the center, those handles, the train engines are facing outward. But if you sort of squint, you can see the smokestack, the wheels. Now, of course, if you're going to have trains, you also need tracks. They're right there. You got it covered. More doors for you. Left, that's Gillette's front door. Nice double latch, added security. Not really. The door on the right is a nice, beautiful lattice door that you would find at the 3rd floor landing. That actually, interestingly enough, has 2 fun features in that it is the only door in the house that has a doorknob. The rest of them are just handles and levers, and also it's the only door that's spring-loaded. Let's see what else we got. Okay, this one looks a little weird, so I have to explain this. You'll notice if you look in the center of the door that something's missing, and if you don't notice, look harder. So, yeah, I have to explain this. Gillette made a mistake. We forgive him. It's cool. So the doors were built off-site, brought in at the end of construction, which was all fine and good, except Gillette didn't realize he had a problem because that couch that's on the left side is too big. He can't open up the door all the way. It's going to hit the couch. So he had to fix it. Now, personally, I don't really like the couch. I would have taken it out and been done with it, but he didn't exactly ask me for my opinion. You can't move the doorway over to the right side because there's an I-beam in the wall, so that sort of stunts things a little bit. And then his quick fix was to have the carpenters just cut out the piece of the door, fit it very nicely around the couch. I know. Now, of course, you open it, problem solved. You close it, you have a ginormous hole in the door. Don't worry, took care of it. Gillette saved the piece. He put in some dowels so he could just slide it out of a corner of the room, fit it back in there, secure it, sort of like a leaf to a dining room table. Same concept. A few doors that you'll find in Gillette's study. The one on the right, that really tall door, we referred to as a secret passage door. He didn't, we do. It's not a secret. You can see both sides of it. Plus, the other side of that door has a sign that says secret passage door. So, spoiler alert. Now, what it was there for is it was a shortcut door. So if Gillette's friends were coming to visit, he wanted to sort of sneak up behind them when they're coming up the stairs. He could do that. If they were already upstairs, he wanted to get away from them. Works just as well for a quick getaway. Even if he's home alone feeling lazy, he could just use it to go downstairs into the basement to his workshop. Saves him from walking around. Now, that rather short door that you see in the center, that's just where Gillette had his safe. It was a regular metal office safe. He just put it behind the door. And then you take a look on the left side, we have that absolutely amazing, spectacular, and beautiful door, and that is a closet. Yeah, it's a house. You need a place for your stuff. That's the way life works. Okay, let's talk about the mirrors. So Gillette had these mirrors. They were 3 mirrors placed in the living room. Now, they look like windows, and that was the idea, but you can see the reflection if you look in there. They basically served as a surveillance system. Now, it's not like Gillette was worried about security or any of that stuff. He just wanted to spy on his friends when they came to visit because it's fun. Now, if he stood on his balcony, looked straight across at one mirror, that gave him a view into the entrance hall. He could see he was coming in to visit. And then the other one he has here shows him a view of the bar. See? Oh, just wait. Hey, look, it's the bar. Okay, so I'm going to actually change gears here for a second and see if I can get YouTube to work, so bear with me. Okay, so let's try this. Who's that handsome rascal? That was like 4 years and many pounds ago. Okay, so if you want to see how the bar works. Oh, uh-oh. Am I going to have to? Oh, let's see. I love technical difficulties. Okay. Okay. Let's see if I appreciate that. Well, it's going to say Jody to the rescue, everybody.
I also brought the pasta, so remember that if I can't get this going.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know because we're going through the browser, so I don't know. The other two I can do through the PowerPoint, so this is the only one that's going to give us trouble. My IT consultant. Yay! Okay. Now you see what I was talking about. Jody, everybody. Okay. So let's get this thing working. Okay. What you've been waiting for, we made it to the world-famous trick bar. Water break. I'll show you exactly how this thing works. Now, when William Gillette designed the bar, he put in 2 hidden locking mechanisms. The first of which is actually hidden right behind this door. Now, it's a wooden block. Pretty basic. Now, the block itself is being held by a pin. Now, if I were to lift this pin out, it releases the block. This is spring-loaded. When it's released, it goes into the pocket on the side of the door. That locks the top part. Now, let's take a look underneath. And right in the middle of the cabinet, you see that lock right there. Now, what's going to happen is, as I bring this door up, that block is going to come down. So, as the block comes down, goes into a notch on the door, that locks the bottom. So, William Gillette would close everything up. He'd take out that pin, put it in his pocket for safekeeping. Everything's locked up. So he would excuse himself to go upstairs to get ready for dinner, and then would invite his friends to relax down here, pour a drink while they wait for him. He'd go upstairs, stand outside his bedroom, take a look through that mirror above the door in the back corner of the living room, and then from there he had a perfect angle on this bar, so he could watch and laugh from a fairly safe distance as his friends tried and failed to get in. Now, he had a really good time upstairs, but he wasn't finished because Gillette would have to slot that's on the side of the bar. It would go into the bar, push that block out of the pocket. He'd put the pin back in to secure the block and keep it so it stayed in the unlocked position. And really, that's all he'd have to do. Now, let's do a little quick recap, see what we've got here. So you can see that it's all locked right now. So, quick question, do you think it's still locked? Okay, let's see if you're right. Not a bad joke, we like it. So that's basically what we have to show you today. I hope you all enjoyed
I'm just keeping this
the
'cause it's
secrets of William Gillette's trick bar and seeing all the other cool features we have in the lounge. Keep it tuned because next time we're going to take you into the study and show you all the awesome parts of that room. Now, in the meantime, make sure that you are liking the Friends of Gillette Castle State Park on Facebook, subscribing to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you like our videos. Feel free to post any comments or questions you might have. And make sure you keep on sharing these with your friends and family because it's really important to get all that information out to as many people as we can.
Yeah, it
and,
is.
I mean, who would want to miss this? I mean, this is pretty awesome. So make
It
sure that you're
is.
telling everyone you know about our great videos here. So
That's what I did during
we'll
COVID.
See you guys next time.
By the way, that move with the camera and the mirrors, I stole that from something CPTV did a little while back, so it is cool, though. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so... Nope. Okay, there we go. Moving on. Okay, we got to talk cats, because people seem to really be into that kind of thing. So it's one of those things people always, they won't remember squat, but they'll remember the cats. So Gillette was known for his affinity for cats, as in he really loved cats. Some people say he loved them too much, and he would be correct, this coming from a cat guy. Whenever Gillette would arrive at a new theater, he would generally seek out the house cat, give him a sandwich or something before he'd even bother looking for the house manager. In the castle, Gillette had roughly 15 to 20 pet cats living with him at any given time. So I like to refer to it as Gillette's Catstle. You like that? It's a perfect joke. I'm just kidding around. Okay. So he treated the cats phenomenally well. They wore bells around their necks, ate meals with him. He threw them birthday parties. On the Aunt Polly, he had a cat named Angelina, who was his feline companion there. He actually put out a couple newspaper letters about Angelina. In one of those letters, he was looking for mice for her, and the other newspaper ad, he actually proudly announced Angelina's membership into the American Red Cross. Not sure how that works, but whatever. Although evidently even Gillette had his limits. Once when he had a couple strays to find homes for, he put out an ad in the local paper. The exact quote is, 2 perfectly black Tommy kittens to be given away. Anyone wanting one or both of these delightful felines must write stating their qualifications. That is, we want to be sure that they do not go to stupid boobs who do not know what a cat is. Would like to have a recommendation from the last cats that you have lived with, but that's probably asking too much. Take a look. So we obviously have Joseph there on the right. That one's easy. That's labeled. And then that little guy on Gillette's shoulder, that's Sir Henry. Let's get to other stuff he enjoyed. Trains. Since Gillette was a child, he'd always loved trains. He knew he wanted to drive one. So in 1927, he had $50,000 laying around in the couch cushion, so he built himself a railroad on the property. Because, you know, that's what you do. It was a quarter-scale narrow-gauge railroad. He had 3 miles of tracks all over the property, built an engine house, 2 stations, several bridges, and a tunnel. He had 2 engines. One was steam, one was electric, several passenger cars. So if you take a look, you can see the electric engine is in the top left. That's Gillette standing in front of Grand Central Station, appropriately named, although the tracks have been taken out and you can now have a nice lunch and the picnic tables inside that shelter. And then the other photos you see, those are all the steam engine. Okay, so we're here, and if you read the advertisement then for this event, then you knew that I would be getting to this, and I actually already had one person ask about it. So let's get to talking about William Gillette's friends. Yeah, that guy.
let me break down the Mark Twain connection. So in 1871, Mark Twain rented a house from Will's uncle, John Hooker, purchased the land, started construction of his house in 1873, moved in 1874. I don't know for sure, but I would say given that Francis Gillette and John Hooker owned all the land here and sold it to people, it's very possible that Francis Gillette sold land to Mark Twain. It's a theory, nothing to substantiate it. So when Mark Twain comes to town, William Gillette was in his late teens, early 20s, which means he was finishing up his coursework at Hartford Public High School. He and Mark Twain became good friends. In fact, his first professional role on stage was a play called The Gilded Age, based on the book that Twain wrote with Charles Dudley Warner. So he originally had a non-speaking part. Eventually, he got a speaking role with a couple lines because somebody got sick. But so when Twain recommended Gillette for that play, he meant it as a joke. He actually didn't think Gillette was going to become a serious actor. And actually, years later, Twain was quoted as saying, "I don't know what I like better, having Gillette make a tremendous success or seeing one of my jokes go wrong." Now, when Gillette first put on one of his, I shouldn't say big successes, The Professor, it was at least a moderate success, his friendship with Mark Twain came in handy because Twain loaned Gillette $3,000 for the production, one of his better investments. Yeah, don't invest in typesetters. Well, okay. Too soon. Gillette's managers at the time were guys by the name of George and Marshall Mallory. At the end of the tour for the Professor, they tried to cheat Gillette out of his share of the profits. So to help out his buddy, Sam Clemens wrote a nice little letter to the Mallory brothers saying, "You have a contract with Mr. Will Gillette, and I'm aware you are trying as usual with you to sneak out of the performance of its conditions. I'm personally interested in this matter, therefore I suggest to you a couple of piety-mouthing, hypocritical thieves and liars that you change your customary policy at this time." So the Mallory brothers actually ended up paying Gillette partially to preserve odds for a future business relationship with Twain. Twain and Gillette remained friends. Gillette's wife, Helen, was a good friend of Livy Clemens. Will's sister, Lily Warner, stayed in the Nook Farm neighborhood. Her kids, especially her daughter, Margaret, who also went by the name Daisy, were friends of the Clemens girls. Now, despite their close friendship, Will never had a chance to say goodbye. When Twain died in 1910, Gillette was on an extended visit to England, unable to return in time for his funeral. Now, to my knowledge, there's no actual recording of Mark Twain's voice that survived over the years. A couple wax discs, try saying that 10 times fast, have been made, but those have been lost or destroyed. Luckily, William Gillette was a talented impressionist. He spoke at Harvard in 1934 and gave a speech where he actually gave his Twain impersonation, among other things. In 1956, a couple of years into his stint performing in Mark Twain Tonight, Hal Holbrook learned of the recording's existence, and it's believed that he may have influenced Holbrook's performance. It's been noted that Gillette's impersonation and Holbrook's do sound somewhat familiar and similar. So let's see if we can get it working here.
It's unlikely that you ever will. No existing recording of Mark Twain's voice is known. Although he experimented with recording dictation on wax cylinders, he soon grew dissatisfied with the process and he abandoned it. The wax cylinders are thought to have been destroyed or recycled. A singular recording, considered the best likeness of Twain's voice, is of the acclaimed actor William Gillette. As a boy, Gillette was a close neighbor and frequent visitor to the Twain household. Twain loaned him $5,000 to begin his acting career.
It was $3,000.
And placed him in one of Twain's plays. Gillette became to the American theater what Twain became to American literature, the leading proponent of naturalism. After a long and stellar career, Gillette was recorded in 1934 when he spoke to students at Harvard University. Here is what he said.
When I was young, I traveled around small towns in New England, giving imitations of actors and she mentioned, but that doctor could bet on it. If it was a dog fight, he'd bet on it. If it was a cat fight, he'd bet on it. Why, if he seen two birds a-setting on the fence, he'd bet you which one would fly first. And he even saw a stragglebug start to go anywhere. He'd bet on where he was going, and he'd follow that stragglebug from Mexico. But when he found out where he was going and how long he was on the board. Old Parson Walker's wife lay very ill once, and for a long time it looked like they weren't going to save her. But one day the parson come in kind of lively like, and one of the boys said, "Well, how's the wife, parson?" And he said, "Well, she's considerably better, thanks the Lord for his infinite mercy. And with the help of Providence, she's well yet." Well, I bet you 2 to 1 she don't anyhow, says Ronnie before he thought a word about it.
So let's talk about some other people, at least the ones you've heard of. So photos on the top, Helen Hayes. She and her mother actually stayed in the castle. Gillette was pretty valuable as a mentor to her early in her career. She starred with him in a play in 1918 called Dear Brutus. She became the first lady of the American theater, so I guess it turned out pretty well for her. Bottom center, that guy, Albert Einstein, had a summer home in Old Lyme in the 1930s and came for a brief visit to the castle. We have a running joke that Einstein used to have normal hair, then he took a ride on the train, and then it, poofed up. It's fun to imagine, maybe, I'm assuming Gillette probably pulled the bar trick on Einstein. So, if you think about it, Einstein knew more about the universe than most people, still wouldn't have been able to figure out the bar. Although I know how it works, so take that, Albert. The guy on the bottom left, that gentleman, Calvin Coolidge, he and his wife loved riding the train around the property. And then the guy in the bottom right, he actually got his start in the theater because of William Gillette. In the Sherlock Holmes play, he played Billy the Page Boy. That's Charlie Chaplin. Yeah. So Gillette knew some people. Now, I wouldn't actually be able to talk about the people in Gillette's life without bringing up Yukitaka Osaki. There he is. Osaki was from a prominent family in the Japanese government. He and his brother came to the U.S. to study. His brother Yukio didn't like it here. He didn't like the weather, so he moved back to Japan. Fast forward, 1912, Yukio Osaki is the mayor of Tokyo. He helps facilitate the donation of cherry trees to Washington, D.C., and he's considered to be the father of constitutional governing. That's his brother, Yukitaka. If Yukio had his way, his brother would have gone back to Japan with him and basically served as his secretary. As it turned out, Yukitaka stayed in the U.S. He lived a modest life, bouncing around in the theater scene for a while. Originally hired by Gillette as a crew member on his houseboat and eventually becoming his valet, traveling with him during his work in the theater. By the time Gillette had moved into the castle, he'd already known Osaki for about 20 years, so he actually built Osaki a small cottage down on the, just down the hill from the castle, right next to the Chester Hadlyme Ferry. He had his own land down there for his garden. He had his livestock. Osaki actually referred to the cottage as the home or the house of the 3 brothers, the 3 brothers being Osaki, his donkey, his mule. Osaki lived on the 2nd floor. The donkey and mule lived on the ground level. They weren't good with stairs. Now, more than an employee, Osaki was Gillette's friend, and he was his companion for much of the later part of his life. Now, the castle was actually meant as Gillette's retirement home, but he never really retired. Gillette was 65 years old when he moved in 1919. His last international tour of Sherlock Holmes ended in 1932, so he was 79 years old. His last stage performance was 1936, so he was about 83-ish. The play was Three Wise Fools, which the second to last production of that, second to last performance was at the Bushnell. Yeah, not bad. He ended the tour in New York, though. Oh well, he came close. He maintained somewhat okay health for most of his life. He was able to manage. Late 1936, Gillette came down with pneumonia, went to Harvard Hospital to recover. Went home in early 1937, stayed at the castle for a few months before getting sick again and going back up to Harvard Hospital. And that is, in fact, where he died April 29th, 1937, at the age of 83 3/4. I always have to make sure that 83 3/4, that 3/4, that's big. So you see here, this is his grave at the Riverside Cemetery in Farmington, although it's actually a lot cleaner now because the Friends of Gillette Castle State Park did a nice cleanup job on it not too long ago. He's buried in the family plot with his parents, his wife, 4 of his siblings, not Edward. Edward stayed out in Iowa. He was sort of the black sheep. We're okay with that. And oddly enough, he was also buried with his sister-in-law, whatever. Now, when Gillette died, his cousin Joseph Hooker was named the executive of the estate along with the First National Bank of Hartford. Gillette's wife's half-brother, Hal Cohen, who'd been living in the castle with his wife, were allowed to stay there after his death. Papers, books, all that stuff was split between Gillette's 2 surviving nieces, and then he left money to 7 people, friends, neighbors, former employees. Value ranged from $200 to $5,000 depending on the person. Any money left over after this fact was afterwards was split 3 ways between the 2 nieces and the brother-in-law. Now, in his will, Gillette gave lifetime use of the cottage and riverfront property to Osaki. So Osaki was still around when Gillette died in 1937. When World War II broke out, Osaki was shocked by the destruction caused by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. Now, some neighbors were concerned. Alan Gates, who was a local minister, wrote letters to the editor of the Harbor Current about his plight. They actually sent a reporter to interview Osaki, but one of his neighbors, Alice Hamilton, actually intercepted the reporter, convinced him not to publish a story that might bring some unwanted attention to Osaki. Another day, an FBI agent visited the area for a routine investigation. I doubt there's any real strong suspicions, but I mean, you're talking about a time when there's a lot of, there's a lot of rumors floating around, especially in small towns, and also at that time, Japanese people were, even if they'd lived in the U.S. for as long as Osaki did, were not allowed to become naturalized citizens, so they may have just been doing a follow-up just to be sure. But the agent first met with the Hamilton sisters. Alice escorted the agent to Osaki's home, stood outside while they talked, and then they came out, not necessarily hand in hand, but the agent recognized that Osaki was proud of his adopted home country and he was cleared of any suspected threat. Now, Osaki's health had already begun to fail in 1941. He passed away in 1942 on September 29th, and then a funeral service was held in the Hamilton's house. He was very, very close to his neighbors. He was very well liked in the community. And he's buried up the road from the castle over at the Cove Cemetery in Hadlyme. Now, as far as the castle, Gillette's family couldn't afford the upkeep, and they wanted to get rid of the property. The problem is William Gillette picked a really bad time to die. 1937 was not a great year to unload real estate, so they actually put the castle to auction. Now, keep in mind, he spent $1.1 million on the house. They tried to start the bidding at $150,000, but they couldn't find any takers. So they actually had to drop it down. They started the bidding at $25,000. The winning bid was $35,000. It was a real estate broker from Newark, New Jersey. His name was Louis Schlesinger. They go to take his picture, shake his hand. They say, "Congratulations, you have the winning bid." We reject it. And there's a reason for that, because Gillette was very particular. In his will, he said, "I would consider it more than unfortunate for me should I find myself doomed after death to a continued consciousness of the behavior of mankind on this planet, to discover," and then he lists all this stuff, the walls of the property, the bridges, the castle, etc., "should reveal themselves to me as in the possession of some blithering saphead who has no conception of where he is with what's surrounded. I'll point to it." Feel free to use that in your own will. It's pretty good. So yeah, they figured the real estate broker's either a blithering saphead himself or he's going to represent blithering sapheads where they might tear down the castle and develop on the land. So they reject his bid, they hold out. Fast forward 1943, state of Connecticut saw it was still on the market. Now they'd been building up the state park system quite a bit during that time. Initially they only wanted to buy the property, not the castle, because castles aren't the easiest thing to maintain. Very expensive, actually. But luckily, there's an organization called the Connecticut Forest and Parks Association. It's the oldest nonprofit conservation group in Connecticut, still extremely active. They lobbied the state. The state agreed they'd buy everything. The problem is they didn't have much money. So the state put down $20,000 of public funding, and then Connecticut Forest and Parks raised $10,000 through private donations. So they offered up $30,000 to Gillette's family. The family accepted. So that was 1943 that the state bought the castle. It first opened to the public as a museum and state park October 7th, 1944, and it's been in the hands of the state of Connecticut ever since. Now, they got it for a steal, and believe me, they let it go for a little while. If you were there in, like, let's say, I don't know, 70s or 80s, probably wasn't the best. That being said, they put a lot of money into it since then. 1999, 2002, they closed the castle for 3 years. $11.5 million restoration. It was worth every single penny. And there's capital projects going on all the time. Last spring, they finished the last phase of a 3-part, $1.99 million capital project, doing some exterior work. And actually, there's still another 200,000+ of capital improvements that are being funded through the Restore Connecticut State Parks program through ARPA and the state bonding. Now, for those curious about the trains, prior to the sale of the castle, Gillette's family had actually sold the trains to Lake Compounds. They sold it for a grand total of $1,000. Remember, he spent $50,000 on the railroad. It was used as a ride around the park until, if I were to guess, probably the late 80s, early 90s. So we get a lot of people at the castle say, oh, I rode the train when at the park. No, you didn't. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I know people. I've interviewed. There's a lady in East Haddam who's about in her 90s, and she literally, her father delivered veggies to Gillette, and she was invited to ride the train, and she remembers that. But most people, they wouldn't have. If you rode Gillette's train, it was at Lake Compounds. Now, in the early 90s, the ride was showing its age, and they were going to upgrade it, so they threw it out, and the castle said, how about you throw it our way? So they did. A few of the passenger cars are actually on display in the castle, in the visitor center. The steam engine is currently secured in a undisclosed government location, and the electric engine actually is on display in the visitor center. Fun fact, so it was, Friends of Gillette Castle State Park raised about $10,000 to have it restored back in 2007. Now, the company that restored it was Ted Tyne Motorsports, which is on Saybrook Road in Chester. Well, actually, the business doesn't exist, although their building's still there. Now, that building 80 years prior was the home of Priest Garage, which is actually the shop that built the engines originally. So it was restored in the same building. It was built in 80 years prior. Now, I had explained that Gillette made a silent film. 1916, he took his Sherlock Holmes play, The Strange Case of Alice Faulkner, turned it into a 2-hour silent film. It was thought to be gone and lost forever until 2014. They found it at a film warehouse in France. They restored it, premiered it in France, and they brought it to San Francisco, premiered it at a silent film festival over there, brought it to the castle, premiered it there. You can find it anywhere. Like if you go to Amazon, you can find it. I've even heard it runs on Turner Classic Movies. So, feel free to take a look there if you want. You can actually see Gillette. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the talk today. It's 8:04. Told you it wasn't going to be 45 minutes. Now, if you want more information, there are a few books available. So one over there on the left, that's Sherlock Holmes and Much More, which is actually the first biography that was ever written of William Gillette, 1970. So for a guy who's as famous as he was, it took 33 years after his death for the first biography to be written. And actually that one, we're lucky because a lot of his family members were still around. Now, the one in the bottom right, that's the most recent one. That is Gillette Castle, A History by Eric Ofgang. That came out in, I want to say it was like 2017. And then the one in the middle is William Gillette, America's Sherlock Holmes. It's the most comprehensive biography of him by far. That was in 2011. How comprehensive is it? It's like 734 pages. So feel free to give it a read when you have a few years of your time. Okay. So, speaking of books, Gillette wrote a novel. So he actually wrote a novel in 1927. It was called The Astounding Crime on Torrington Road. It was published by Harper and Brothers, the predecessor of the present-day HarperCollins Publishing. Written with a detail and flair for the dramatic as any of Gillette's plays. It's thought that the inspiration for the novel came from the murder of Joseph Brown Elwell in 1920. Like Gillette's plays, the novel seemed to do what he did best, draw wide appeal and entertain readers. Locals who read the title assume it refers to Torrington, Connecticut. Nope. It was set near Boston. Now, while mystery novels were in their heyday, Gillette did his own thing. He didn't adhere to the norms of the genre. He just did what he wanted to do. And they say that by reading it, you can glean a lot about not only his wit and mechanical mind, but you can also find a lot of parallels between the novel and his life. Why do I mention that? Well, first of all, he wrote it, so that's cool. But actually, thanks to the Friends of Gillette Castle State Park and Tony Lynn Miles, if you want to stand up, feel free to stand up or give a wave. She's the one who actually spearheaded this. She's getting it reprinted. The book was released in 1927. It's going to be released again. So Bellinger Books took on the task. So they're re-releasing it, and actually the introduction was provided myself. So there will be a release party at the park on June 15th. It's a Saturday. Feel free to keep your eyes out for that info. Now, if you've spent all this time thinking, Gillette Castle sounds pretty cool, it's the type of place I want to visit, what do I need to know? A lot more than I'll tell you. But first of all, the address, 67 River Road, East Haddam. That's where you'll find that sign. Well, actually, they have a newer sign now, but something looks like it. It's a park, so that means it's open 365 days a year. The castle's not. It's only open seasonally. So it's open Memorial Day weekend, usually through Labor Day weekend, and then 7 days a week. And then if they have enough staff, then it would be open weekends during the fall, and then weekends during the holidays. It's decked out for Christmas. Even if it's not open, check it out. It's still pretty cool. I mean, you have the state has added about 80 acres or so, so you're talking about 200 plus acres of land to wander around. There's tons of walking trails. There's great views. You can get right up to the castle, go out onto the very nice, recently restored terrace. So it's still pretty cool. You can have a nice picnic there, hang out, whatever you want. And then Memorial Day weekend it will be open. They limit entry 12 people every 15 minutes, so I recommend if you do go, get your tickets online ahead of time. They should be already available through reserveamerica.com. But anyway, yeah, so that's that place. And that's their website. They recently redid it, so it looks nice and pretty. And if you just Google Gillette Castle State Park and you look for something that looks like, I used to say ct.gov, but it's not even a ct.gov website anymore. But if you look for something that looks like that, that's where you'll get the actual information, because Google doesn't have good information. It's usually wrong. It's a great meme of Abraham Lincoln has a quote from him that says, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." Now, for those who wish that you could meet everyone's favorite castle resident, you can. These lovely folks are Harold and Theodora Niebuhr, otherwise known as William and Helen Gillette. They're members of the Baker Street Irregulars, an elite literary society of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts. They're two of the greatest living experts on William Gillette. They've been associated with the castle since the 1970s, and they generally hang out at the castle for fun. On Sunday afternoons during the season to educate and entertain, they're always in costume. They have a whole bunch of stuff. This awesome shtick that they do, they're the greatest. They're the nicest folks. If you want to learn more about them, SherlockHolmesCT.com. I'm okay with some shameless self-promotion, so if you enjoyed my presentation, you can check out an entire video series. You saw the video of the bar that we did during COVID when the castle was closed. Figured I have nothing else better to do. May as well do some videos on the castle. So we did an entire video series, 30 plus videos that show you everywhere in the castle, including the places people aren't allowed to go. Also, tours of the grounds, also a lot of fun tidbits and information, more than I can give you in this amount of time. Also, special shout out to Kelly Schiller, Cherish the Moment Photography, aka my lovely wife. Feel free to stand up, wave, whatever you want. Okay, because she was the extremely patient videographer for that YouTube series. I am what they call high maintenance. So she was very patient. And she's also volunteered her photography services for the castle on numerous occasions. And actually, a couple of her photos will be in that novel that's going to be republished. Now, Gillette did one film in his life. That was a silent movie. But 1927, Fox Movie Tones did a new story on Gillette and his railroad. So I'm going to leave you with William Gillette in his own words.
Ever since I was an infant, and for all I know before, I've had the idea that I'd like to drive a locomotive. People didn't tell me that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I've often heard that I was born with a steam engine in my mouth. And at last I got one. I had to build one so as to drive it. It's a long while since that occurred, but now I've got my wish at last. And I'd like to see if some of you would like to come and take a ride, or maybe. We'll have a little ride around the place. What do you say? All right, we'll do it. Good thing, yes. All right. Goodbye.
It's a thrilling 20 miles an hour. By the way, if you wanted to see this, all the videos that I've shown are on YouTube. So obviously, the one from the bar is and of the lounge. That's part of our YouTube series. This one you could just find on the Deep Video YouTube channel, and then the one with Mark Twain's voice. Just literally type in Mark Twain's voice. Yeah, that's what I got. That's my email. If you have questions after the Q&A, because I have to imagine that. I mean, I've got nothing to rush home for, so if you want to hang out, that's cool. I dig it. Those are a bunch of sources I used, okay? Just so you're aware.
Okay, we'll be happy to take a couple questions if anyone in the audience has it. Just wait for me to come to you so that we get the people at home can hear on the microphone. All right, so I see one back here. Perfect.
Hi, no question. Just like to thank you for this presentation. It was really great. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. It's been like a year and a half since I've been able to do this kind of stuff, so it's nice being able to flex my castle muscles.
Was that a standard narrow gauge railroad, or was that a special gauge? Do you know?
So he was asking if it was a standard narrow gauge or a certain other type of gauge. I mean, it was just it was a quarter scale, but it was, as far as I know, it was just a regular narrow gauge. I mean, yeah, like an amusement park ride, which makes sense because it went to Lake Compounds.
I have a question regarding the soap opera that was filmed in the castle. What did that do for the castle? Did that bring in
Absolutely
revenue?
nothing that I'm aware of. I know that one was filmed there, and I mean they film random stuff there all the time. Well, I shouldn't say that all the time. A few random things have been filmed there, but as far as I know, it didn't bring any publicity to it. I don't know if people will even realize. Now, granted, I haven't seen it. I know that they did film the soap opera. I don't even remember which one. I know I found out years ago, but As the World Turns. Search that. As the World Turns, Gillette Castle. See what you come up with. It won't be me.
All right, let me bring the mic over here.
Hello, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. I have a quick question here.
I have a long answer.
Mr. Osaki, the Japanese proprietor who lived there, has there been a movement to, because his brother is famous, I've been to DC, you see the cherry blossoms trees all around the water, but has there been a movement to try to get more cherry trees at the castle in honor of him, especially his brother?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. The long answer. So actually, the Friends of Gillette Castle has actually developed a really great relationship with the Japan Society of Greater Hartford, and they had actually brought over a bunch of cherry trees. Well, they had actually. Now, Tony Lynn, you can correct because you're with Friends, so you know if there's updates to this. When last I was there was so they had actually they were trying to get the cherry trees that were actually directly descended from the Washington D.C. cherry trees. They had some issues getting those through customs or agriculture, so they ended up buying some other cherry trees and planting them all over the property. I don't know if the ones they had actually ordered that have the direct connection, that they haven't been planted yet, they haven't arrived, but there are cherry trees up there. And I will also mention that something I was working on a year and a half ago that's still in the works is they're working on getting an interpretive sign for Osaki's house. There's one up there now, but it's very much temporary. And they're looking, I know the Friends group has been active in the house has gone into disrepair, so they're looking to spend some money to get that rehabbed a little bit, and then maybe it will serve a purpose, but at least if it isn't open to the public, it'll still have the sign and it'll still be not leaking from the roof. So, you know. Oh, just took them a couple days. That's all it took. Yeah, so that's pretty cool because Osaki's house, the bottom floor, so they used it as and concessions for a while back in the 80s. And also, there used to be a lot of river camping down there, so they actually turned the lower level into restroom facilities. So, and then the top floor is just all open stuff, and it's all very shabby and terrible condition. So if they're going to rehab it and turn it into an educational center, that's pretty cool. Thanks, Tony Lynn. Okay.
When I was a kid, there were some of the railroad tracks on the cliffs along the Connecticut River.
Yep.
And the last time I went there, they're all.
So the tracks would be long gone. No, I know what you're talking about. So there's an area where the train would stop, and there was a walking platform where you could actually get out towards the cliffs. It was they refer to it as ship stern because the two cliffs that the bridge goes across, the platform go across. It's just for walking. The train didn't go directly over the water, but it was. If you look at it, it looks like the stern of a ship, and I believe some of the posts from the trestle are have collapsed deep into the woods, and those are still there. If you want to see train track, there is one stretch of train track that's left. If you were to walk towards the castle from the visitor center, there's a big stone wall, stone archway. And if you look just to the right of that archway, you'll see that there is a stretch of track. It's maybe 15, 20 feet long. But that's the only track that's actually visible.
We had a question, this will probably be our last one, but can you talk about if there are any descendants of Gillette left?
Okay, so that's a good question. So depends on if you're talking direct or indirect. Indirectly, I mean, first of all, the Gillette family was huge. Actually, both sides of their family were huge. The Gillette family and the Hooker family had settled in this area both in the early to mid 17th century. So if you can consider the last almost 400 years how much the family tree branches out, there's a lot of connections there. I mean, he was related to other famous people too, just through that. As far as direct, now Gillette never had any kids. His sister Lily, she had 2 kids, Frank and Margaret, neither of whom had kids. And then that left Edward. He had a couple of daughters who, as far as I know, did not have children. Now, that being said, I will say, back in 2018,
we did an event at the castle where we had an architect doing a presentation on the architecture of the castle, and yeah, Wendy Vincent, former president of the Friends of Gillette, feel free to give a wave because she's the one that coordinated that event. We got in contact with, so I had mentioned Joseph Hooker. Joseph Hooker was Gillette's cousin. He was much younger than Gillette was, so he was around for a while. He stayed in this area. He was a VP at Aetna and did some other big stuff. I believe he was around until like the mid 80s. He had kids, and one of his kids, Mary, had actually come to the castle. I mean, at that point, she was probably in her 80s, more physically agile than the younger members of her family, because she made it all the way up to the 3rd floor of the castle, no problem. But she came to visit. She had a good relationship with the castle. The only other family that I'm not entirely sure of is Gillette's brother-in-law, Hal Cohen. He and his wife moved. He was originally from Ontario, so they moved back to Canada eventually after the castle was sold. I don't believe they ever had kids, so there's not really too much directly in that circle as far as, descendants of Gillette. The best I can give you is that his cousin, who was very close with him, I mean, his cousin handled all of his business affairs. His cousin had a couple of kids, and they are still in the area. I think Mary's up in Massachusetts. I'm not sure where the other one is, but and they've at least reconnected with the castle, so that's cool.
All right, please thank Paul by giving him a round of applause. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you at our next Trouble Begins. Thank you.